but we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling here on this little question, and we'll share those results, all right, with you guys. Hopefully you're seeing that. Evan, are you seeing that?
I am not seeing the results.
Okay. Well, I'll share with you the results. It doesn't sound like you guys are seeing the results. But on norovirus, we had answers. I think it looks like 7 people said 3 days would live. Someone said 3 hours. Someone said 3 weeks. Actually, interestingly enough, the answer is 30 days. Norovirus can live for up to 30 days. And I start with this because I want folks to understand. Well, let's get into the to COVID-19. Most of you guys answered that pretty good. All right, you said 3 days, and there is a study from the New England Journal of Medicine that says specifically that it can live up to 3 days on a surface, on a hard surface. The real answer probably is right now we don't know. There's not a lot of information out there. But the reason I show these two viruses and compare them is we're pretty fortunate that COVID-19 is what we call an enveloped virus, meaning it's easier to kill, and it doesn't live as long on the surface as some viruses do. And so I'll discuss that later as we get into this presentation, but I like to start with that just to kind of give us an idea of how COVID-19 lines up with other viruses. All right, so I'll get started here. Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here. Welcome, Evan. Thank you for coming on this first ever Kaeb Sanitary webinar.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I will say this. This webinar is a little bit more school focused. I sent it actually out to most of our schools on the email list, but there's some other customers on it, and that's great. Hopefully there's some relevant information for you too. Really, we're talking a lot about COVID-19, so it should be relevant for really all of us, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is a slide I show to schools, and I like to talk about why is infection prevention so important. Well, even a month ago or 2 months ago, this slide didn't feel like that big a deal because people were we weren't thinking about infection prevention in the way that we do now, right? But this obviously is before COVID-19, but typically with schools, we're talking about what's the economic impact to schools for viruses, for lost days due to norovirus influenza, right? And so you can see here, hey, what's the cost? K through 12, you can see some of these costs down here with teacher absences and substitute teachers, and not to mention even when kids aren't in the seat with federal funding, and then ultimately kids aren't where they need to be to learn, right? But we've really changed, and I think all of us have changed the focus. It's more than economics now, right? It's lives are at stake. And in the healthcare world, we always talk about lives. And there's economics that are involved in that too, but more than ever, we're talking about saving lives. So I always show this slide when I present to schools because I think it shows the economic impact, but it's more than that. This is just an interesting slide. Once again, it comes from Victory Sprayer. I have that noted down there, but I think this is interesting. Where are we seeing germs, essentially? And 3,200 bacteria per square inch on a toilet seat versus look at the water fountain. Now, there's reasons for that. One is, hey, we're pretty religious on disinfecting the toilet seat and taking care of that. But I think this just points out, and I kept a slide on here just because with COVID-19, we want to be very, very aware as hopefully we're back in school in the fall. What are some of these points that we really need to be paying interest to? We know it's all the touch points, but there's some other areas that we really need to make sure we're focusing on as well. Water fountain's one of them, right? Okay. So here's what most of you probably came here today to really learn about is actually COVID-19. And this is a little graphic showing the different levels, I guess, of viruses and bacteria and how they respond to disinfectants. So the hardest to kill is in that high level area, which would be bacterial spores. So an example of this is C. diff. You see that a lot in healthcare. It's a big problem. One, because it's so hard to kill. And so bacterial spores are the hardest to kill. You need some high-level disinfectant, typically something that'd be chlorine-based or hydrogen peroxide, peracetic acid. There's different products that kill that. The next level down is what we call a non-enveloped virus. That's the norovirus is something that fits in that, all right? And still hard to kill. You still need a pretty robust disinfectant to kill non-enveloped viruses. But the good news for us, like I mentioned before, is that the SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19, the virus responsible for COVID-19, is actually what we call an enveloped virus, meaning it's the easiest to kill. And so this will make more sense even as we get a little bit later talking about the EPA and their view on this. But basically what they believe in a nutshell is if a disinfectant has claims against at least one virus, that's one step up from whatever that emerging pathogen is, in this case it's COVID-19, that they believe it's going to be effective against that virus. So in this specific instance, since COVID-19 is an enveloped virus, they believe if you can kill a non-enveloped virus, at least one non-enveloped virus, we're going to have success killing COVID-19. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, I'm going to skip past hand hygiene. Like I said, I've kind of molded this presentation into from school presentations, and I'm going to dedicate one webinar just to talking about hand hygiene, and I think that's worthy since it's such an important way that we can prevent COVID-19 and protect ourselves against not just COVID-19 but all other kinds of viruses. But let's get into cleaning and disinfecting for health, because that's a critical. So critical now. And I wrote our philosophy at Kaeb Sanitary is real simple. We believe that products and processes equal outcomes. That's not mine. I take that from Triple S. There's a lot of people that believe the same thing. I think you guys do too. But the fact is right now we're all looking for an outcome. And the outcome we're looking for really is we want to defeat COVID-19. We want to make sure our students are safe when they go back in the fall. Our patients are safe. Our families are safe, and so we want to do the right process and use the right products. So, for instance, you see that nice little Buckeye disinfectant cleaner in the lower left of your screen there. And if someone's spraying that product on a handle, they spray it and they wipe it right off, they didn't get the outcome they're looking for. Why? Because they didn't observe the proper dwell time. So, on the flip side, let's say you use some product that's not EPA registered, you spray it on that handle and you let it dwell for 20 minutes, right? Are you getting the outcome you're looking for? No, you're not. So it really is a combination of the right products and the right process to get the outcome that we're looking for. Now there's a lot of tools that can be used. You look here and you see a microfiber rag that I put on there. You see a spray bottle. There's a lot of different tools that we can use in our fight. Evan's going to talk about one of those a little bit later. But we have to use those tools correctly. All right, this is a slide I borrowed from CPI, and they might even be on this webinar. I saw that they signed up, so if so, thank you. For those who maybe come next week, we're going to be doing another webinar specifically with CPI talking about microfiber. You might see the slide again. But I like the slide. I think it's a great one because I think there's a lot of confusion, especially between sanitizing and disinfecting. I'm going to talk about that here just real briefly. But one of the things that I want to really key on is the cleaning. We've heard so much in these last couple of weeks about disinfecting. In fact, the Illinois Department of Health is, recommending, hey, and I know some of our nursing home customers, hey, you need to disinfect 3 times a day. My big concern is let that not be, let's not miss out on the cleaning. We need to make sure we're doing that too. Why? Well, because if we have dust and dirt, it's a breeding ground, right, for bacteria. Evan's going to touch on that a little bit later. So cleaning is such an important part of this whole thing. We need to make sure we're cleaning and then disinfecting. All right. So what's the difference between sanitizing and disinfecting? This has been one over the years I've seen so much confusion around. So you go to the supermarket, you see a disinfectant wipe that says, hey, it kills 99.9 or 99.99% of germs. That is actually what we call sanitizer. it's either a 3-log or a 4-log reduction. That's what it takes to be a sanitizer. It's much different, and I'm going to try to explain this here in a second. It's much different than disinfecting, which is actually a 6-log reduction. It's a 99.9999% reduction. Why that makes a difference, let's review back to that first slide where we said, hey, there's 2,700 germs sitting on that toilet seat, which seemed pretty low compared to some of those other things. Well, if you're getting a 3-log reduction by using a sanitizer, that means there's potentially 27 microbes still left on that surface. Even if you're getting the 99.99, there's still 3 microbes. What happens with microbes? What happens with bacteria? They grow. Evan will talk about this later, but they grow. They double. They can double every 20 minutes if it's in the right environment, right? So it's so important that we actually disinfect versus sanitize. So in that same example, with those 2,700 germs per square inch, if you were disinfecting with that 6-log reduction, there'd be 0. There'd be no germs left, essentially, okay? And that's why that's so important, and it's important to understand. Okay, EPA List in. Probably a lot of you have seen this. This is important information. This is where I'm going to be handing over to Evan here in a second. But I just want to talk a little bit about how a disinfectant gets on this list. All right, there's actually 2 ways. If a disinfectant previous to this outbreak had a coronavirus, a human coronavirus claim, they could be put on this list. The real way most products get on this list is they can kill that one step up. They can kill at least one non-enveloped virus, okay? And what the EPA is saying, obviously we have no testing right now in COVID-19. So anyone, at the end of the day, we don't have a test yet for it. But the EPA believes if we can kill that one step up, we're gonna be effective against COVID-19. So when you look at this list, just take, for instance, that very first product on the list. You see, I'm not familiar with it, but it's a thymol, that's the active ingredient, and it's going to kill coronavirus, which is a non-enveloped virus. All right, that's how it got on the list. It's really, really important to make sure you're reading that label and understanding it. And I'm going to turn this over to Evan because there's some things I didn't even understand that Evan, just in the last couple of days, there's so much new information happening all the time that I thought was really, really relevant. So I'll let you take over here. So thanks, Evan.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you guys for having me. The big thing that I want to make sure we communicate with this EPA, list N is this is a list of essentially the active ingredients or the registrants for disinfectants. Any disinfectant that you use in your facility should have an EPA registration. I would assume most of them do, if not all of them. They all should. And the big thing with this is that I've had questions where people try and look up our EPA registration or try and look up our product on here and they can't find it. Well, that's not because this is not a list of products, it's a list of registrants. So for example, on the very far left corner on this slide, you see the EPA registration number, maybe a list of 5 numbers. Some are, some EPA registrations are 4. Then it has a dash, a number, and then for most products, it'd be another dash and another set of numbers. And that last set of numbers is always the, whatever chemical manufacturer their specific product code or their company code. Buckeye, for example, is 559. So if Buckeye were to have that first registrant listed there, the thymol active ingredient, the Buckeye product would be 84683-3-559. So if you're wanting to know if your current disinfectant is on this list, all you have to do is just take the first 2 sets of numbers, plug it into that search bar, and it'll tell you whether or not that product is on there. But the big thing too with these emerging pathogen claims and people trying to figure out if their disinfectants are effective against COVID-19 or effective in the fight against COVID-19 is it is so important that you make sure you contact either your distributor or your vendor or the actual manufacturer themselves to make sure that you're using the product properly. Clint, I see someone asking if they would enlarge the slides. It's very small for the viewer.
Yeah. I think you have the option to click on the speaker face or the slide, and it'll change the size. So you guys get to do that individually, should be able to do that. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So sorry, let me back up. So the big thing, like I was mentioning, is make sure you're using the products properly with their appropriate dilution rate, where they've been approved by the EPA for the fight against COVID-19. So for example, I've got our Buckeye E23 neutral disinfectant here, one of our most popular disinfectants. It's on the EPA registration for, it's been for the emerging pathogen claim. This disinfectant has 2 different dilution rates. So out of our proportion system, it can come, at a 1/2 ounce per gallon out of the mop bucket, or 2 ounces per gallon out of the spray bottle. Now, for the emerging pathogen claim, it's against adenovirus type 7, which requires a 2 ounce per gallon dilution rate. So kind of deductive reasoning there is, if I were to use it at a 1/2 ounce per gallon, it may not be effective against COVID-19. It may not, we don't really know, but if we want to be, have that safety net, if we're doing the most we absolutely can against the fight against COVID-19, I'm going to make sure I'm using this and recommending to use it at the 2 ounce per gallon dilution rate, which if you have our dilution system, out of the dilution system in the spray bottle side, you're doing fine. But it's so important because there's some disinfectants out there, even on the Buckeye side, where the dilution rate is vastly different than what it is for a normal usage every day. Some are the exact same dilution rates, but then some that are, you might use at a 2 ounce per gallon dilution rate, that for the EPA emerging pathogen claim, you need to use at 8 ounces per gallon. And that's a big difference. So it's very important. And I encourage you guys, if you haven't already, is to talk with your whoever you get your cleaning chemicals from. If you know that your disinfectant is on that emerging pathogen list, make sure you're using it at the proper dilution rate, because that's the biggest thing. Because while, yes, you're using it day to day, you're still killing all the things it's registered to kill, but it may not be effective against COVID-19 if you're not using it at the proper dilution rate. And the big thing too, as Clint was mentioning on the previous slide, is the dwell time. Dwell time is number one when it comes to disinfectants. If I were to take this, E23 and spray it on this table and then wipe it down, all I've done is I've cleaned the surface. I removed the dirt. I removed, any dust, dirt, whatever might be on the surface, but I haven't killed anything. And that's where the dwell time of making sure you're spraying it and keeping that surface wet for that appropriate dwell time is so important. For this disinfectant, for 100% of the kill claims, is a 10-minute dwell time. It does kill some viruses, in 4 minutes or in a couple minutes, but in order to get that 100% kill claim, you want to let it sit 10 minutes to completion, and that's making sure the surface is completely wet. If I just sprayed and did a light mist and walked away for 10 minutes and came back, I guarantee the surface had not remained wet for 10 minutes, and then I haven't really, again, done what I've needed to do. So the dwell time when it comes to disinfectants is so crucial.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Evan, because I've seen that with numerous customers, especially in this last 2 to 3 weeks, just not necessarily understanding that. And so, I think that's a critical part of this whole thing. So we're going to segue here, and I'm going to have you share a little bit about Buckeye and their training procedures, and maybe talk a little bit through this.
Yeah, so part of what we do at Buckeye is we're big on not only providing proper products, but the proper procedures as well. If we have the products and the procedures, we want to get the outcomes that we've talked about. And one of those procedures that we love to utilize is our Buckeye Honors Training Program, which is a online web-based training program, completely free to use if you're using any of our cleaning chemicals or whatever it may be. But what it does is it kind of helps standardize training from whether it's a brand new hire to someone who's been there for 15 years. It kind of teaches everybody the same industry standard steps to not only make sure we're cleaning effectively, but cleaning in a time effective manner. We all know that, custodial staffs are always tasked with more work and less time every single year. So if we can, the last thing we want to do is to cut corners when it comes to cleaning, especially in a time like this where, cleaning really can have an impact on lives. So what we've done is, this is actually a wall chart taken from our routine restroom cleaning. And what we do, whether it be routine restroom or routine, daily cleaning, is we take the ISSA standards of the 5-step cleaning procedures, which is start off with high dusting, move to spot cleaning, then you dust mop or sweep, then you empty your trash, then you damp mop or vacuum, depending on the room you're in and the surface you're trying to clean. But what we've done is we've kind of revamped it to, because of the situation going on, is we've kind of revamped it to kind of enhance the cleaning procedures with that added step of disinfecting those high touch surfaces, because that's such a crucial step right now, and probably will be for the foreseeable future. So again, this is a wall chart that is, you'd be able to print up and hang in your custodial closet or on the custodial cart, and it just kind of walks through each step. So that first step is disinfecting. So for example, in a restroom, the first thing you do when you walk in is you find those high touch surfaces, whether it be the toilets, the urinals, the water fountain, or the water faucets, handles, whatever it may be, and you spray them with disinfectant and make sure you're spraying them enough that the surface can remain wet for up to probably 7 minutes at the most, because we're actually going to go back and hit it in a minute. But you want to make sure you spray it, and the big thing is do not wipe it down. Let it sit, let the disinfectant do what it's supposed to do. And then while you're doing that, you can start going around making sure you're high dusting, high dusting above the mirrors, above the stalls, above the doorways, because again, as we kind of mentioned, dust and dirt can be a breeding ground for bacteria, and bacteria like to thrive in dirt and dust. And it's something we're kind of, with this disinfectant, what Clinton's already mentioned, is we're kind of afraid it's going to get overlooked as we move forward. So it's very important to make sure we're removing and cleaning and removing that dust and dirt from areas that may get neglected. After that, you can go through and spot clean. So clean your mirrors, clean the glass, check soap, paper towel, paper toilet or toilet paper dispensers, refill as necessary. Spot clean the walls or partitions if there's graffiti on there. And then after that, it's probably been 6 to 7 minutes since you've originally sprayed that disinfectant on your high touch surfaces. You could then go back, re-wet the surface, and then you can wipe it down, and that surface should remain wet the final 2 to 3 minutes of the necessary 10-minute dwell time. And then after that, then you can go through and pick up any dust mop, or scrape up any gum or debris and empty trash, and then you can damp mop with your disinfectants.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you say, damp mop with disinfectant. In the past, historically, I have a lot of places that don't use a disinfectant on the floor. For instance, I think about like when you auto scrub. Let's be realistic. The fact is if you have a disinfectant in the auto scrubber puts down solution,
picks it right back up.
So there's no dwell time, right? So me and you yesterday when we practiced this, we said that, hey, this is a nice segue into this tool that we want to talk about, which is a new product, or I shouldn't say a new product, but an enhanced product called Clarion 25. So I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide and have you talk a little bit about this product.
Yeah. So for those who may not be completely aware of what all Buckeye does, Buckeye is we kind of made a name for ourselves, over the last couple of decades of being a floor care being our forte. So floor finishes, floor strippers. We manufactured all in St. Louis, along with our cleaning chemicals, hand hygiene, gym floor coatings, and everything. And for about, for really the last 5 to 6 years, we've had a product called Clarion 25 in our product line. That's been very popular, especially in school districts, for being a high quality floor finish that responded well to burnishing. If you wanted to burnish, if you didn't burnish, it still the gloss would hold up. But what we did near the end of 2018 was we came out with a new version of it where we partnered with Microban, which I'll get into who Microban is as a company in a little bit, and to come up with the first ever antimicrobial floor finish. Because when this was presented to us, and just over the years, we came to realize that, the floors are often overlooked. Yes, we run an auto scrubber over them. Yes, we'll dust mop them. But, when it comes to, paying attention to bacteria, mold, mildew, microorganisms, floors and soles of shoes are sources of contamination. Not only that, but cross-contamination. We take our shoes everywhere. Bacteria, microbes, they love to attach themselves to our shoes, and then we just transfer them wherever we walk. And so being able to come out with something to kind of help with that fight, or in the fight against microorganisms, this has been a big win for us and our, the end users, being able to create, just take that extra step of making sure the facility is as clean as possible.
Sorry about that.
Um, you're good. You can go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
And this is just a list of, I'm not going to get into all of them. These are just lists of studies and articles that we kind of reference in terms of why this is important, why we're doing what we're doing when it comes to Clarion 25 with Microban. And the one I always like to point out is the second one there on the left, the Daily Wildcat. It's a University of Arizona study, or it's done at the University of Arizona by Dr. Charles Gerba. We actually reference him in our symmetry hand hygiene presentation as well. So we like Dr. Gerba a lot. But he did a study of, he wanted to see how viruses and microbes and everything move when it comes to shoes and floors. And so what he did was he took a group of students or just a group of people and gave them new pairs of shoes, anything from tennis shoes to dress shoes to boots, all across the shoe spectrum, and had them wear them for a while, and then they came back and actually swabbed them to see what the bacteria level was on their shoe, and actually found that on average there was over 421,000 units of bacteria. As we saw on the one of the first slides, there's only 3,700 on toilet seats, so they're finding that on average there was bacteria liked our shoes more than like toilet seats, which was not fun to find out. But then what he did, he took a step further and actually had each person walk on a series of untreated tiles to see if any bacteria would transfer from the shoe to the tile. And he found that over 90% of the time that was happening. It was going from the floor to the shoe, back to the floor. So bacteria, microbes can transfer very easily when it comes to shoes. And as we know, with floors in our facilities, there's not a surface that gets cleaned every hour. It's just not feasible, when it comes to the time that everybody has on their hands. So being able to come up with something to kind of help with that, reduce that bioburden, is all the more important for a facility.
Yeah. So let's share a little bit of what Microban really is. Some people have heard of it, but you can at least talk a little bit about Microban.
Yeah.
We'll put a few slides on that.
Yeah, so Microban as a company, they've been around since 1984, and they've really established themselves as a global leader in surface modification technologies, which is part of the reason why Buckeye decided to partner with them. We view ourselves as a leader in cleaning and maintenance. We want to make sure we're partnering with ourselves with someone who's kind of on that same tier in their respective field. And the big thing too with Microban is, their product is EPA registered. EPA gets thrown out a lot right now because of all the disinfectants. So the fact that they are an actually EPA registered antimicrobial that they can now then put in someone else's product on that surface is huge. And you'll find Microban in over 1,000 products across 30 countries and 4 continents. I know they recently definitely took a step forward. They came out with their own line of household cleaning products, bathroom cleaner, sanitizers, where it actually you can disinfect a surface, and the Microban actually helps protect that surface for the next 24 hours. Difference between that and Clarion 25 is actually the Clarion 25 Microban works for the life of the floor finish. But so Microban is definitely going to, I think, skyrocket in terms of the brand recognition as we move forward.
So let's answer this question here, because
a lot of times we hear, and even I've done it myself, where antimicrobial and antibacterial kind of get thrown around almost interchangeably, but in reality, antimicrobial is actually a combination of antibacterial and antifungal. And what an antimicrobial is what is defined as destroying or inhibiting the growth of microorganisms, and especially pathogenic microorganisms. And how an antimicrobial is different than a disinfectant, where a disinfectant provides a limited residual activity once the treated surface dries. So for example, I take my E23, I disinfect this desk, I kill all the germs, but once that surface dries and then a contaminated object touches that surface is now contaminated again with whatever was on that object. Whereas if something uses an antimicrobial that's embedded into that surface, that antimicrobial technology works to continuously minimize the presence of microbes throughout the entire life cycle of the product. So it's kind of fighting the fight for you in between those cleaning periods, which is huge. This is just a nice little snapshot of kind of who Microban works with on a global level. A big one there is Koala Care, the baby changing stations you see a lot in restaurants, airports. Medline is huge in the medical industry in terms of distributing products, Rubbermaid, trash receptacles. Obviously some nasty stuff gets thrown in there. So anything we can do to kind of help cut down on the odor causing bacteria in trash cans is huge for Microban. Sure, we're going to their paints. This is just kind of more of the actual products that you might see. There's a baby change station there on the top, in the middle. If some of you use Kimberly-Clark paper towel dispensers there on the far right, they have Microban in it. Even here in the middle, those are the trays that you might use at an airport when you throw your keys in your wallet, and you think about how much stuff goes into those trays and they don't get cleaned. They just kind of go down the line and come right back. So being able to kind of have that extra level of protection is huge. It's something that when I saw that come out, I was like, that was actually a genius idea to do that, because I never thought about how dirty those things probably are. So.
Well, I'm out of that stage now of life, but the fall baby changing station, I remember using those in some pretty nasty bathrooms over the years. And,
right.
I don't know if those were infused with Microban at that time. I mean,
right.
My kids are a little older now, but yeah.
But you think about, a bathroom, like you said, is not the cleanest environment, especially like in a restaurant or, like a Starbucks or something like that, where it doesn't get cleaned all the time like it would a school. And, we're putting, infants on these tables who don't have the best immune system. So being able to have something there that's, again, reducing the amount of bacteria that's being, introduced to that infant is huge for the life of that infant. So.
Let's talk a little bit about this slide here.
Yes. So how Microban works in Clarion 25. So the really cool thing about it, Microban, is that it's actually infused into Clarion 25 during our manufacturing process over in our manufacturing plant in St. Louis. So it comes infused with the product. And so when you lay Clarion 25 down on your floors, you have a complete coverage of Microban on your floor. It's not one of those things where it's, hit and miss. It's more so in other areas. It's, complete coverage throughout the entire finish, no matter where, even the smallest, you drop the smallest pin on the floor, if it hits Clarion 25, it's hitting Microban. So as long as you've got Clarion 25 on your floor and you're making sure you're keeping it, you don't have an inch of dust on the floor, that Microban is going to work for the life of the floor finish. Because what happens is microbes then, if they get transferred to the hard surface, the Microban actually penetrates the cell wall of the organism. It kind of disrupts the cell and stops its ability to grow and reproduce, make food, eliminate waste, and actually kind of the microbe or bacteria has nothing else to do but eventually kind of just die on its own. So that's how the Microban works on the floor.
Yeah.
And so what Clarion 25 has been able to do for us and our partners is provide facilities with an extra level of protection, antimicrobial protection, in between cleaning and disinfecting. The important thing we always like to stress is this is not a replacement for cleaning and disinfecting, but what it does is it allows, again, that 24/7 protection in between those cleaning periods. Clint mentioned earlier, under the right environments, bacteria and microbes can double in number every 20 minutes. If you clean a surface or disinfect a surface within 2 to 6 hours, that bacteria level is back to where it was before you even cleaned it. So being able to have something there doing the work for you to help reduce the amount of bacteria you might find on a surface just makes your facility that much cleaner. So by the time you go through and you clean it the next time, you're essentially cleaning less bacteria, less microorganisms off that floor.
Yeah, thanks for that. I do see a question here about, it says, how long does Clarion 25 kill the microbes on the floor?
So it doesn't kill. That's the big thing that EPA makes sure we don't say, because it doesn't kill anything. All it does is it inhibits the growth or the spread of the microorganisms. The killing would come from the disinfectant. But as long as Clarion 25 is on that surface and you're keeping it, clean, like, I mentioned, like, what we don't want to happen is people put this on the floor and they think, cool, don't have to clean anything anymore. And then all of a sudden, months go by and you just have a level, a layer of dirt or soil on the floor because you haven't dusted or cleaned or anything like that. The Clarion 25 is essentially useless at that point, because when you're walking on that dust, you're not actually walking on the Microban. So as long as the big thing is you continue your normal cleaning schedule, what the Clarion 25 kind of just helps is supplement those processes. But the roundabout way, the Microban works for the life of the floor. So as long as Clarion 25 is on your floor, the Microban's working. Whether that's, you just do a top scrub and recoat with a couple coats, or you do a full strip out, 7-coat program. But the Microban works as long as it's on the floor.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting. And I'm going to add one more question because I think everyone's kind of thinking about this and, hey, what's the effectiveness, obviously, against COVID-19, right? Any thoughts on that, Evan?
I mean, there's nothing. I mean, we know nothing about what is effective against COVID-19. Kind of all what Microban is kind of how we, I guess the language we use is it's effective against microorganisms on the floor, or I guess on that surface. So in this instance, it would be the floor. But in terms of directly against COVID-19, we just don't know because it's just so new. Just like with our disinfectant, no one out there can legitimately say that they have a kill claim against COVID or SARS-CoV-2 because there just hasn't been time to test it.
Yeah, no, I probably should have prepped you for that question, but that's exactly what I would say if someone had asked me the question is there's just a lot of unknowns out there.
I did see on the in the chat, Mark says school nurse just called and said she cannot find E23 on approved list, but it is on there. So the EPA registration so if you go to that the EPA N list that we talked about earlier, and you type in 47371-129, that is the EPA registration for E23 without the Buckeye code of 559, but it's a registrant. There's also been a list of the Center for Biocide Chemistry also came out with an actual list of products. So that has anything from Spartan to Buckeye to Hilliard to whomever, Triple S. And that has a list of actual products. You can also utilize that list as well. That has the EPA pre-approved products.
There's been a lot of questions on that, Evan, that I fielded, and Buckeye actually put out a nice technical bulletin that I forwarded to people. So I can forward that. I see where the question is coming from, and I can forward that to you, Mark. That might be helpful just to be able to hand out to people. I do that a lot.
Yeah. The big thing is, I mean, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. So on E23 bottle, there is the EPA registration number. And like I said, the most important part is that first two sets of numbers, because that's the actual active ingredient registrant that's in the product. And that last set of numbers is simply just for the chemical manufacturers of the world, the Buckeyes, the Spartans, whoever made the actual, added the fragrance, added the color, maybe added some other ingredients for the cleaning properties. But the most important part is that first two set of numbers, because that's going to tell you if that registrant is on the EPA pre-approved list. Yeah. So, like I said, we have a whole list of all. We have a lot of disinfectants. Not all of them are on the pre-approved list, but we have most of our disinfectants are on that list, and we can absolutely get a copy. It's a research fact sheet for it. So, and it actually has the dilution rates on it too, which is obviously super important.
Yeah. Hey, at this stage. If you guys do have any questions, I've seen a few come through and we've addressed them. If there's any other questions, hey, you can put them up there now. We're this will kind of finish up the main portion. Thanks so much to you, Evan, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Really relevant information. Thanks so much for you who came. This is something that we're going to do, especially in these next several weeks while we're all sheltering in place and maybe not able to get in and do the typical stuff we do. We're going to be trying to provide relevant information from some of our manufacturers. So we plan on, I'll put another email out. It'll go to all of our customers, not just schools, to do something next week, actually be on the use of microfiber in the fight against COVID-19. But really appreciate all of you. Like I said, if there's any other questions, you can put them down here, or just email or call me or Evan. We're happy to talk about that. That's what we want to be. We want to be a resource in this crazy, crazy time and do our best to get you guys answers. So thanks for being on. Appreciate it. Thank you, Evan, for being on.
Thank you.